Well, I had hoped that this day would not come. Part of the reason I had hoped that it would not come is that I did not want this gentleman to be gaffled up by the system for doing something that I think a great deal of us find to be completely understandable. The second reason, and my bigger reason really, was that I realized that as an anonymous symbol, the United Healthcare CEO shooter is symbolically very powerful and pure, but as an actual human being with an identity and a history on social media and all of those things, everything becomes a little bit more complicated because now we have to examine motives and influences and things of that nature. And I feel that while I am normally someone who appreciates that sort of complexity, in this instance, I feel as though it just muddies the waters a little bit. But reality does not kowtow to my or anyone else's whims. And so we now have to contend with the fact that we do know who this guy is, what he believes, and so on and so forth. So, Luigi Mangione. This is the fella right here. This is the guy. And if you look here, you see that he is, in fact, what you could call a thirst trap. He is ludicrously hot for someone who is accused of a nationally important act of violence against the system, so to speak. So initially, after this happened, his Twitter was taken down, but it seems that due to public pressure, it has been restored. And that's why we now have an indication of the sorts of things that this guy believed and so on and so forth. One thing I really did like is that he's not a fan of Jordan Peterson. He says, "This is why Jordan Peterson always bothers me, overcomplicates everything he says aloud, wasting everyone's mental bandwidth in having to decipher it. The best teachers are the best communicators, clear, succinct, simple language." Thank you so much. Yes, I 100% agree with that. There's a lot of things, though, on this guy's Twitter I do not agree with. He seems to be what I would describe as a right-leaning, centrist intellectual. He's definitely not a member of the far right or the alt-right, but he is a nominally right-wing centrist figure, which in some sense does actually make his act, I think, more profound. Because, you know, you expect the person who engages in this sort of political action to be someone who is on the fringe of politics, but from what we can see in his social media history, he's not really a fringe figure on most fronts. I mean, the influences that he has are very mainstream. Let's take a look at some of the people he follows on his Twitter here. He's got Ezra Klein. I know who that is. This guy right here, this Zuby guy, I despise. Terrible, imbecilic person. He's got, let me see who else I recognize. He's got a Sam Altman parody account that he likes. I think he also follows the actual Sam Altman. Yes, he does. Edward Snowden, of course. AOC he follows. RFK Jr. he follows. He follows Richard Dawkins, I believe I saw on here. Yes, there's Richard Dawkins. There's Joe Rogan, who still follows me for some reason. Andrew Huberman, this guy. I mean, I've listened to a few Andrew Huberman podcasts myself. I kind of think he's an interesting figure, if not someone I take extraordinarily seriously. Trevor Noah, I mean, it's very mainstream sort of influences here. And you see some that are nominally left, nominally right, but really not anybody that you could describe as particularly extremist. Probably the most extremist figure that I recognize anyway. There's obviously a great deal of people on this list that I have no idea who they are, but this Zuby guy I've always found to be an imbecilic, right-wing, knuckle-dragging troglodyte. But for the most part, very mainstream influences. And if you read his opinions, very mainstream opinions, seems to be something of a traditionalist, seems to have a sort of mildly anti-pornography stance, seems to bitch and moan about brutalist architecture and things of that nature. And I actually agree with him on that, by the way, even though that does tend to be a right-wing position, and I don't consider myself particularly right-wing. I do actually agree that a lot of our architecture is ugly and dehumanizing. And I think aesthetics is an underrated realm of philosophy as well. But, this guy, he was, a lot of people expected him, I think, to be some kind of radical left-wing guy. He's not. He does seem to have some problems with the for-profit healthcare industry, obviously. His motives for doing what he did seem to be exactly what we thought they were. He was a guy, he had in his Goodreads page, which unfortunately has now been put private, not by him, but by the website itself. His Goodreads page made it pretty clear that he had read several books about back pain. He was highly interested in the subject of back pain. And it does seem that he did what he did in reaction to the practices and policies of the health insurance industry. So whether or not you view that as a left-wing or right-wing cause, that does seem to be the motive, which is I'm very grateful for. I'm very grateful that he does at least seem to be motivated in that regard by exactly the things that we thought he would be. But, the full width and breadth of his philosophy, politically and otherwise, seems to be very centrist, seems to be a little bit nominally right-wing, which, I don't know, I guess it complicates things a little bit. I do think that there is far too much emphasis placed upon these political tribal affiliations, and that the paradigm that we all seem to be going by strikes me as outmoded at this point. And I think further evidence of that would be the fact that, figures like Ben Shapiro put out videos chastising the left for celebrating this guy, and their own audiences turned against them en masse and said, hey, Ben, it's not just the left, buddy. It turns out that no one likes being treated as fodder for an exploitative and cruel and dehumanizing industry. Here are some of the quotes that we garnered from his Goodreads page, because if you have a Goodreads account, apparently you're able to, put quotations that are inspirational to you and organize them via some sort of list. I wish we could look at the entire list, but I only have available to me at this point this one little page here. His top quote is from J. Krishnamurti, the philosopher that a lot of people just shorten his name to K. I'm a little bit familiar with Krishnamurti because my friend Galen was a big fan of Krishnamurti, who's sort of a guru sort of figure. He says, it is no measure of health to be well-adjusted to a profoundly sick society. His second quote is Socrates' know thyself. His third quote is the great Bertrand Russell, saying one of the painful things about our time is that those who feel certainty are stupid, and those with any imagination and understanding are filled with doubt and indecision. Not only a brilliant man, but a brilliant quote. And the fourth quote is, a ship is safe in harbor, but that's not what ships are for. That's by John A. Shedd. I have no idea who that is, and I am assuming he's not particularly famous, considering he doesn't even have an image here. Nonetheless, a great quote, and I think we can all resonate with the truth of it. I know that I can. What else do we know about this guy? We know that he reviewed the Unabomber's manifesto, giving it 4 out of 5 stars, which is kind of great. Like, hey, yeah, okay, pretty good, but I could do better. I stole that joke from someone I saw on Twitter, but I do think it's pretty interesting. So here's what he says about Theodore John Kaczynski's manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future. He says, clearly written by a mathematics prodigy, reads like a series of lemmas on the question of 21st century quality of life. It's easy to quickly and thoughtlessly write this off as the manifesto of a lunatic in order to avoid facing some of the uncomfortable problems it identifies, but it's simply impossible to ignore how prescient many of his predictions about modern society turned out. He was a violent individual, rightfully imprisoned, who maimed innocent people. While these actions tend to be characterized as those of a crazy Luddite, however, they are more accurately seen as those of an extreme political revolutionary. A take I found online, but I think is interesting, had the balls to recognize that peaceful protests had gotten us absolutely nowhere, and at the end of the day, he's probably right. Oil barons haven't listened to any environmentalists, but they feared him. I think you can see some of his motivations coming out here, by the way. When all other forms of communication fail, violence is necessary to survive. You may not like this method, his methods, but to see things from his perspective, it's not terrorism, it's war and revolution. Fossil fuel companies actively suppress anything that stands in their way, and within a generation or two, it will begin costing lives by greater and greater magnitudes. This might give us a clue, by the way, as to why he followed AOC, who authored the Green New Deal. It will begin costing human lives by greater and greater magnitudes until the Earth is a flaming ball orbiting third from the sun. Peaceful protest is outright ignored. Economic protest isn't possible in the current system. So how long until we recognize that violence against those who have led us to such destruction is justified as self-defense? These companies don't care about you or your kids or your grandkids. They have zero qualms about burning down the planet for a buck. So why should we have any qualm about burning them down to survive? Interesting sort of read of this book. I think that we sense a great deal about how this guy, Luigi Mangione, thinks. And I don't know if I can offer any notes, really, because I think that he's once again proven that sometimes it is these large revolutionary actions that do lead to a more focused discussion of the issues at hand, let us say. So anyway, let's take a look now at some of the other things we know about this fellow. We know that he had a YouTube channel. He uploaded a video called The Truth 3 hours ago. It seems that somehow he had managed to have this on a time release after his capture. And it seems that this video was going to lead to a second upload. It says that he is all is scheduled. Be patient. Bye for now. Unfortunately, he didn't reckon with the fact that YouTube was not going to allow his account to stay up. So I don't think we're going to be able to see what his intended follow-up or follow-ups were to that initial post. He probably should have just uploaded them to begin with instead of a countdown. This is the video that he uploaded. It's no longer available on YouTube, but it is here, and it's nothing special. It's simply a countdown. It says, if you see this, I'm already under arrest, and it counts down to the release of the follow-up video that I suppose was going to contain his manifesto and his explanations as to why he did what he did. But unfortunately, he did not reckon with the fact that YouTube was not going to allow this content to remain up. So we are probably not going to see what he was going to upload unless he had some sort of backup in place for this, contingency. As far as we know, he did not. But it is interesting to realize that he knew that this would capture the public imagination. He knew that this would spurn some sort of discussion and larger movement. And I guess it's not that prescient to figure that out, considering that he shot a high-level CEO, which is rather unprecedented in America. But unfortunately did not have the prescience to see that YouTube was not going to let this, stay up. So what else do we know? We know that he was accomplished as a student. We see here that he delivered the valediction at his, I believe this is his high school, perhaps. And I've watched it. There's nothing particularly, revealing about it. It seems to be a rather standard valedictorian speech, yet it does show that he has a high degree of intelligence. He was an Ivy League student, both in, I assume, both in high school and in college. He graduated top of his class. So he is a highly intelligent individual. And I suppose that's not surprising whatsoever. I mean, just the fact that you could tell just from his writings, whether you agree with what he's saying or not on his things like his Twitter, you could see that he communicates effectively and that he has well-formulated opinions on the subjects on which he speaks. Here is an example of a post that I don't agree with. He's talking about Japan here. Modern Japanese urban environment is an evolutionary mismatch for the human animal. Well, I believe that's actually true of many societies, including ours. The solution to falling birth rates isn't immigration, it's culture. It's cultural. Encourage natural human interaction, sex, physical fitness, and spirituality. Which is very strange he encourages spirituality, considering that it's clear from some of his other posts that he himself is not spiritual. And I kind of condemn this attitude of, I'm not spiritual, but spirituality is good for other people. It's basically saying, I'm smart enough to see through the bullshit of religion, but other people should be, it should be imposed on others because that will, be good for them. And I don't think it is good for them. I think that this is elitist conceit. But here's some of the things he says. He says, ban Tenga fleshlights and Japan real hole customer porn star pocket pussies being sold in Don Quixote grocery stores. I wasn't even aware that was happening in Japan, but you know what? Good for them. I mean, if you can fuck a pocket pussy, then that's all the better for you. Replace conveyor belt sushi and restaurant vending machine ordering with actual human interaction with a waiter. Basically just saying that, these conveniences of modern times have left us isolated, which is kind of hard to argue with, I think. Replace 24/7 esports cafes where young males earn false fitness signals via Tekken fighting and Overwatch shooting games with athletics in school. Basically saying that, things like video games lead us to feel as though we're engaging in some sort of physical activity when it's, in fact, entirely illusory, and we have been consigned to a sedentary lifestyle. And I don't really have any particular argument with that. Heavily stigmatized maid cafes where lonely salarymen pay young girls to dress as anime characters and perform anime dances for them. I mean, I don't know how stigmatized those currently are. I feel like they're probably not celebrated in Japanese culture, but I'm not sure. So he's speaking, of course, he's pronouncing prescriptions for a culture that I'm not really super familiar with. I'm not a weeb. Revitalize traditional Japanese culture, Shintoism, Okinawan karate, onsen, etc. I am anti-traditionalist. I do not like traditionalism. I think that we do not need to move backwards. We need to move forwards. And we don't need to crawl back into the arms of ancient superstitions and, outdated modalities. We need to discover new modalities that actually serve human beings. But what I do agree with him on this post is that so much of our modern sort of cultural infrastructure does not seem to exist to serve us, but to suppress us. And he's absolutely right on those fronts. So some contention there. Not 100% contention. I would argue with some of it, but some of it I actually do agree with. So it's not, you just have to look at it with some nuance, I think. Sorry, my dog is barking. And that's all I have pulled for it. And that's all I really want to say about him at this juncture until we learn a little bit more. But I do want to go ahead and just read for you guys And I'm sorry about my dogs barking in the background. There's really nothing I could do about it unless I just go in there and kick the shit out of them, which I'm not going to do because, you know, animal cruelty is bad and everything. But I think that I do want to read to you a script that I had written prior to this guy's capture that just addresses this situation in a broader sort of sense. And, you know, hopefully, I think that it still very much pertains to what's going on. And I hope you enjoy it. I had intended to do this as a full-on production and into the Fray video, but at this point, I don't see any purpose in doing that. So I think I'm just going to read it to you here and now. So my eyes will pretty much be over here reading. Hope that's not too distracting or whatever. But here's what I had to say prior to knowing this guy had been caught, and I stand by every word of this. I have already gone through and made a few little adjustments based on what has happened. So if I catch something that I should have adjusted that I missed, I'll go ahead and whatever. You don't need this long, ponderous explanation. The United Healthcare CEO was gunned down in New York a few days ago. Maybe you've heard about it. He had a name, but I refuse to commit it to memory, and I refuse to look it up. I'm going to treat it the same way that it treated the 50 million people insured by its company, with an utter refusal to recognize its humanity, with an utter refusal to extend 1 ounce of compassion towards its existence, or non-existence now. Do I celebrate its death? No, because it doesn't make a difference. The for-profit health insurance industry will not change its practices. It will hire more guards for its bigwigs. It will unlist their names from its websites. It's already done that, by the way. But will it stop placing profits above people? Of course not. Why would it? Health insurance is a business. It has shareholders. Its purpose is profit. And if it can make more profit denying your claim than accepting it, that is precisely what it will do. A dead CEO does not change that reality. It's just a bit of catharsis, empty catharsis. We are weighing the blood of one against the blood of thousands and the suffering of millions. I could give you statistics. I could tell you that in 2023, a survey by the American Medical Association revealed that 9% of physicians attributed prior authorization requirements, a common reason for claim denials, to at least one patient's disability or death. I could tell you that United Healthcare denies approximately 1/3 of submitted claims, which is notably higher than the industry average. But of course, the industry average should be 0. In fact, the industry shouldn't exist in the first place. I could tell you that 41% of adults report having debt from unpaid medical or dental bills. I could feed you negative stats about the health insurance industry all day long if I really wanted to, but why would I waste my breath? You already know. The industry is a festering pile of miasmic garbage with big, bold stink lines emanating from its every rotted and sour crevice. It amazes me that so many of us, when faced with the death of some money-grubbing misanthrope business parasite, react in exactly the appropriate way, and yet we allow the system that birthed him to continue its demonstrably unnecessary and inarguably deleterious and exploitative existence. We've allowed the 2 major parties in this country to slink away in shame from this mockery of a healthcare system. In the last election, Trump clearly had no ideas on healthcare. We all remember in the debate when he said he had concepts of a plan after more than a decade of being a political figure, or very close to that. He still just has concepts of a plan. And Kamala's big answer on the healthcare front was to make it generically more affordable. So I have to ask you guys the question, how in the fuck do we not have universal health care yet in this country? I am so sick of making this goddamn argument. It shouldn't even be an argument. The people pushing back belong to 2 categories. People who are so stupid that to even acknowledge their opinions is a disgusting affront to even the most tenuous notions of human dignity, and people who are so rich and sociopathic that they have reduced our lives, as in yours and mine, to nothing more than just a statistic that they can safely ignore or actively exploit. You need to ask yourself this, okay? You need to ask yourself if this moment is just a catharsis or if it is a catalyst. Because this isn't about the United healthcare CEO that got ventilated. It's about the system that made him possible. A system that rewarded his ruthless efficiency with millions of dollars while punishing ordinary people for the crime of needing health care. It's about the legislatures that have taken millions from this industry and refused to act. It's about the media that frames universal health care as some radical fantasy rather than the global norm. It's about us, the people who allow ourselves to be lied to, manipulated, and divided while the vultures feast on our misery. So I repeat, catharsis or catalyst? Is this a moment where you blow off a little steam and then move on to the next virtue signal? Or is this a moment where you decide that enough is enough and actually fight for an end to this grotesque system that profits off of human suffering? Because that's the only real question that matters now. The death of a single CEO, no matter how symbolic the satisfaction it might bring, changes ultimately nothing unless it sparks something larger. Will this be the moment when we collectively refuse to accept a healthcare system that prioritizes stock prices over human lives? Will it be the moment we demand universal healthcare not as a privilege but as a fundamental human right? Or will we let this moment pass, as so many others have, with nothing more than a few fleeting expressions of outrage? The reality is this: every delay, every denial, every unnecessary death caused by our for-profit healthcare system is a policy choice. It's a choice made by lawmakers who have been bought and sold by the insurance industry. It's a choice made by executives whose bonuses depend on keeping payouts low and profits high. And it's a choice we allow them to make every time we fail to demand better. We know the solutions. Universal healthcare works. It's not some radical experiment. It's the norm in every other developed nation. It saves lives. It reduces costs. It gives people the freedom to live without fear that a single illness or injury will ruin them. But achieving it requires more than just being angry. It requires organizing. It requires fighting back against the billion-dollar propaganda machine that tells us universal healthcare is impossible or unaffordable. It requires electing leaders who will fight for us, not for their donors, and not settling for anything less. Fuck anyone who tells you to vote for the lesser evil. They are complicit in this rot, and they can join Mr. United Healthcare down there in the dirt, as far as I'm concerned, at least until they come to their senses and demand better. But if voting was enough, we'd have this by now. You want this change, you got to be willing to not just vote for pretty promises. You got to hold your politicians' feet to the fire. So for far too long, we've accepted broken promises as just part of doing business here in this country. But if a politician promises you something and then they fail to fight tooth and nail for it, then you have to make them regret their betrayal. You have to make them sorry they ever ran in the first place. The American public is a joke to these people, the ruling class. They fear us about as much as a tank fears a marshmallow. And who could blame them? They know you. They know from experience just how much bullshit you will tolerate from them. They see you like a dog that barks and snarls from behind the safety of the fence, but grovels and cowers when the gate flies open. These people should be terrified to break their word to us. And they just aren't. They know we're all talk. They know we'll just blow off a little steam online with our friends, and then we'll fall in line like the good little shit-shoveling slaves that we really are. Why do they think that? Because that's the lesson we've taught them, isn't it? With our predictable outrage cycles, our empty threats, and our endless willingness to settle for the crumbs, we've taught them that they can lie to us, manipulate us, exploit us, bleed us dry, without facing any real consequences. And until we change that, nothing else will change. If we want a system that serves us instead of exploiting us, then we need to become the thing they fear, not just in numbers, but in resolve. We need to show them that breaking their promises has a cost, a steep, undeniable, career-ending cost. We need to stop playing their game by their rules because the game is rigged and the rules are written to keep us powerless. So how do we change this? We stop accepting failure. We stop tolerating betrayal. We stop letting them string us along with empty promises and platitudes. We organize, we disrupt, we demand. And when they refuse to listen, we make it impossible for them to ignore us. That means showing up, not just to vote, but to protest, to strike, to put every pressure on every lever of power that we can reach. It means refusing to give them an inch of comfort or complacency. It means being relentless, unapologetic, and unyielding in our fight for what we deserve. Because make no mistake, they will fight back. They will call you radicals. They will call you unreasonable. They will use every dirty trick in the book. They will try every distraction. They will try every division. They will try everything they can to wear you down. But if we, the people, aren't willing to engage in that fight, then count me out of this empty celebration of one CEO's death, because it's not radical. It's just empty catharsis of a serf who celebrates the death of one feudal lord and then immediately cowers before the next. There's all these opinion pieces floating around in the media landscape right now about how it's a really bad sign for society that so many people are glorifying the actions of a vigilante, that so many people are actively hoping the killer gets away scot-free. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. Of course, it's a bad sign, you idiots, but the fact that these people are surprised is probably a big clue as to why trust in mainstream media has eroded into dust in this country. These people, these so-called journalists, are so disconnected from the society that they are paid to report on that they just can't believe that we aren't all crying in our oatmeal because some hate-filled greed demon got his guts blown out onto the sidewalk. How are you paid to describe a society that you don't even understand? Apparently, the misery and exploitation that is visited upon everyday people is so hypothetical to them that they don't see why we've turned this man into a folk hero. I'm glad no one in their family has ever suffered or died at the hands of the healthcare system that values neither health nor care. Of course, lionizing vigilantism is bad, but whose fault is it that that's happening? When people see that our system not only fails to punish inhumanity, but in fact rewards it, then what are we supposed to do? We are the constituent parts of that very humanity that's under attack. Are we to subvert our own desires to survive and thrive in order to preserve a social order that affixes corporate profits as a higher good than our own lives? Are we to value the health and well-being of our friends and family and neighbors less than we value the social cohesion of a society that has codified cruelty towards them? If that is or was or ever has been the expectation of us, then those who have that expectation are fools, and they have no business calling themselves journalists or commentators or politicians or whatever. They are dupes at best. They are collaborators at worst. And I speak as one of the 50 million people, one of the 50 million Americans who has United Healthcare. I've experienced its inhumanity firsthand. My wife has back problems. She's done physical therapy 3 times for it. It never helped her. It actually made her problems worse. And knowing this, her doctor told her she needed to get an MRI. But you know what? United Healthcare wouldn't pay for it. They said she needed to try physical therapy again. And she wasn't willing to go through all the pain again just for her problems to get worse again. So her problem remains unaddressed to this day. And no prizes for guessing her reaction when someone told her, me, that the loathsome son of a bitch at the top of that shit heap got shot. And because she reacted the same way any self-respecting person would. Her story is commonplace in this country. And it's not even one of the particularly brutal examples. There are so many heart-wrenching stories out there of people suffering debilitating pain and death because of our private health insurance industry. Any human being with a modicum of empathy with a modicum of self-respect looks upon that entire industry as repulsive. And the saddest thing to me is not even that these people have suffered physically and financially, not even that they've lost their lives. The saddest part to me is that not one lick of it was necessary. So much of that pain and expense and death was and is entirely avoidable. And that's what I have to say about this issue. If you liked it, thumbs up, comment below, let me know what you think. I appreciate you guys for listening to me. I appreciate you guys for being here and sitting through this whole thing. I know it's a long one. So, much love to all of you, and Godspeed, good luck. Love you all. Bye-bye.